Welcome everyone to our Spring 2022 series of OTF Connects webinars entitled Supporting Teachers' Efficacy and Student Engagement. My name is Peter Beans, and I'm honored to be your moderator for today's session with Teresa Acquis and Micheline Gallant, entitled Providing Subject-Focused Leadership on Current Issues. Before we get started, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge we are gathered in the traditional territories of various Indigenous peoples, and we further recognize our duty to support the achievement of the calls to actions, stemming from the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. So please allow me to welcome Teresa Acquis and Micheline Gallant. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly, Micheline?
Yep.
Gallant? Yeah. Teresa is a teacher with the TDSB and the Toronto representative for OFSHEEA. She has participated in writing projects for both these organizations. She is an enthusiastic family studies teacher who recognizes the potential of this subject area to lead our education system in making positive and necessary changes to both content and pedagogy. Micheline is a former family studies teacher from the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board, for which she worked for 31 years. Since June 2019, she has served as an instructor at the Faculty of Ed at Western, teaching both pre-service and AQ courses. Micheline is also a member of the Board of Directors of OFSHEEA, where she has been involved in leading the creation of engaging and relevant resources and professional learning opportunities for teachers of family studies. She's the mom of two and grandmother of one, enjoys yoga, food, and travel. So now let's turn it over to Teresa and Micheline.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. Are you seeing my slideshow on your screens?
We are.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so our workshop today is about providing subject-focused leadership on current issues. I think we're going to talk a little bit more as we go about what that means. Peter did a lovely job of introducing both of us. I just wanted to mention that OFSHEEA, so the organization that both Micheline and I are part of, is the Ontario Family Studies and Home Economics Educators Association. So if you're looking for more information about OFSHEEA, our website is up there. And we're here to talk a little bit about one of the projects that OFSHEEA has been working on in order to support our members and family studies teachers across the province. But the project that we've worked on is also, of course, something that we think that, teachers can, in many subject areas, can kind of benefit from this type of work. So we're here to share a little bit about that. Peter did a great land acknowledgement. I just want to share that personally, I'm on the territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Wendat. And I think it's important to mention that because I think some of the work that we are talking about in this presentation is work that really directly relates to the territory that we're on. And, we engaged in some of the work that we're going to talk about because we recognize the importance of having a relationship with the nations of the territories that we're on right now. So we did want to open up with a little discussion question. So our discussion question, and I recognize that we are a small group today, so hopefully a couple or those of you who are here might participate in this discussion, but how is your subject association supporting your members with significant societal changes and increasing demands on teachers? So you can have a moment, I'm sure, to think a little bit about that question. And if anyone wants to kind of jump in with some ideas to respond to this, that would be fantastic.
Perhaps the first question might be, are our viewers members of subject associations?
And again, you can respond by unmuting yourself, or if you're more comfortable responding in the chat, that's perfectly okay. If you're not a member, maybe are you aware of the subject association for your subject area?
I think so much of this has been very, just since the beginning of the pandemic, we've really had to think about the different ways in which we are supporting our association, supporting our membership. And it's a conversation that we've had quite a bit at OFSHEEA. in particular, having to move from a face-to-face conference to a virtual conference definitely was an area that we had to do a lot of work in, and that took a lot of work for us to do as an association in sort of figuring out how to do that. So that was definitely one area where we had to make some significant changes, I think, in the work we were doing.
I'm going to pop in a link to the list of all the subject associations. So if our viewers are not familiar with them, there's all the different subject associations. So basically it's, all the different subject areas are represented, as well as the affiliates. Many of the board level groups are represented as well. And we meet 3 times a year. So if you're not a member of a subject association, we encourage you to reach out.
Yeah.
Most definitely, I can talk to the value of being a member of a subject association and being on the board of directors of a subject association. In addition to, getting lots of resources and supporting my teaching practice, I think one of the really big values in it is our subject associations are the voice of your subject, right? And often we are the group that, maybe not so much recently, but definitely in the past, where we worked a lot with the Ministry of Education in providing, curriculum review and curriculum supports for teachers as well. So I think it's really important to sort of have an understanding of those subject associations and some of the work that they do.
So Angela, I see you mentioned that you're not aware of any support. Which subject do you teach? Okay, so I'll look in the list and I'll point out a subject association you'd be interested in. I'll just pop it in the chat for you.
And then one of the things I think that we found, as Michelin mentioned, we're maybe less involved with the ministry than we were at one point. So one of the things that we have tried to do as a subject association is to maybe fill that gap in terms of providing some leadership to our subject area. So I'll let Michelin talk a little bit about what we did.
Okay, so this screen here, do I need to switch to do anything I don't know, can you see me? I can only see Teresa.
We're looking at the Our Journey screen.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you can see me. Great. Or I can see me anyway. So thank you. So this first slide sort of gives you a bit of an idea of where we sort of started in this particular project. And I'm going to use this slide this slide's going to sort of become a bit of the framework for the project or for our presentation today. So we'll sort of work our way through all of these different components or parts. So Teresa, you can go to the next slide, I guess. Okay, so first off, when we talk about a timeline, this sort of shows where we started last August and where we are now as we head into May. And really, what had happened is, as we sort of look at our curriculum that's out there, our curriculum in family studies in particular was released in 2013, but really written mostly in like 2008, 2009, 2010. So we have a curriculum now that is, 12 or 13 years old. And because we are a subject area too that has many broad courses and deals with many current issues, and we're looking at family and the changes in family, changes in parenting styles, changes connected to food nutrition, and global education, as well as things like environmental education, and then dealing with the diverse peoples of Canada and of the world. We're finding that what was written in our curriculum in 2010 to 13 is really getting a little bit outdated. So that's where the idea for this project came. And so this timeline, we'll sort of talk a little bit about sort of what we went through. And again, we'll sort of talk about this as we go through. But you can sort of see how it's been almost a year since we started. So Teresa, I'll get you to go to the next slide. Great. So this here sort of talks about that idea of inspiration and where the ideas came from. As I mentioned at the beginning of the workshop, we really did start, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, we needed to start thinking about how we might do things differently for our members. So, we were very traditional in our approach prior, and we would have, a yearly conference, and we would have some workshops in different regions of the province. We would send out emails with new resources. We had our website that had resources for teachers and people who were members, that kind of thing. But as we sort of moved into the pandemic, we started to think about we need to do things differently. We were also beginning to see that, when we were having our yearly conferences, attendance wasn't always great, mostly because the conference would be held in the Toronto area, but that really wasn't serving the needs of the people who were living up north or out in the eastern parts of the province. So we needed to start looking at other options. And so we started coming up with things like monthly workshops, which Zoom has allowed us to do. Those monthly workshops have become a very key part of the work that we do within the association. At the beginning of COVID too, we also started looking at, because we teach things like foods and fashion, and we also have the infant simulators, or the robot babies, as people call them. Those are all hands-on components of our curriculum. We did find that people were asking us during the beginning of COVID, what should we be doing with respect to, food safety and having students doing food labs or students sewing, bringing the babies home on weekends and things like that. So we came up with the COVID protocols for our subject area. And that was very well received. We, as an association, put something together. We shared it on our website. And in the end, it turned out that it was being used all across the province, and many school boards that they don't sometimes think about us, because we're a smaller subject area. A lot of the work goes towards things like, phys ed and science and tech. And so as a family studies association, we identified a need that people were asking about how to manage much of the experiential learning during COVID. And so we came up with those and put that on our website. And as I mentioned before too, our current curriculum, because it was last updated so long ago, it really did need to be updated and changed so that things were more current and relevant. So that's really where a lot of the inspiration for this project came about.
So, of course, when we came up with this idea of doing what we're calling curriculum advisories, so really what these are documents that are intended to complement the Ontario curriculum and provide suggestions of how to cover our curriculum while incorporating more of these current issues and current topics in the curriculum. So, of course, the first thing that we needed to do was identify some of the topics that we felt that needed to be addressed in our courses, and that we felt that the teachers in our subject area wanted support with and needed some guidance on how to cover those topics. So in conversations with our board of directors, conversations with teachers in some of the workshops and conferences that OFSHEEA has hosted, as well as conversations in the Ontario Family Studies Teachers Facebook group, which is not run by OFSHEEA, but which we actively participate in, we kind of identified some areas where teachers wanted some support because our understanding of these topics has changed so much since the curriculum was originally released. So we recognized that, with the release of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in report in 2015, that one topic that we wanted to explore further was First Nations, Métis, and Inuit perspectives in family studies. We recognized that there has been a new food guide published in 2019, again, since the curriculum was written. The new food guide does take a slightly different approach to nutrition than the previous one. And along with that, there are a lot of changes happening into how we talk about food, how we talk about bodies, etc. So we recognized a need to develop a resource to address diet culture and how that comes up in our food courses. So we started with those two topics as our first two projects. And then in the fall, we will also want to look at how we are incorporating 2S LGBTQIA+ perspectives in family studies courses. So things like our parenting courses, Families in Canada, how are we including those perspectives? And we also recognize, again, with many of the events that have been happening in recent years, particularly some of the events in 2020, that our teachers need more support and more ways of including anti-oppression and anti-racism work in our family studies courses. So we identified these 4 topics as areas that are really pertinent to our subject area, where we have opportunities for our subject area to provide leadership, and where we recognize that there was a need to provide some support for teachers. So we did have another discussion question, and I'm hoping that some of you have some ideas about this question. So what are the topics that are currently trending in your subject area? And what are some of the topics that members need support with? So I know someone mentioned in the chat, they feel like there is not a lot of support there. So maybe, what are those topics where support is needed, where maybe more resources or guidance is needed?
Is there any specific support you're looking for right now, Angela? So you're looking for like content, specific content? I noticed on Facebook there's an Ontario teachers Google Drive group, and they're sharing a lot of resources. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, we really recognize too, like the Family Studies Facebook group is a great place. Teachers are so supportive, really helpful, sharing lots of resources.
Let me find this group for you.
Yeah, there are, and we just were talking about it actually in my AQ course at Western today, that there are so many amazing Facebook groups out there that I think are so beneficial and helpful for teachers in all subject areas. Some of them might be specific to your actual teaching subject area, but in other cases too, they can be ones that are more connected to, using technology or e-learning. But other ones are more connected into things like, that are more generic kind of thing. But we did, there's so many pages, and some of the pages are from the States, some of them are Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a great one, Ontario High School Social Science Teachers. There's Ontario Virtual Educators. There's Ontario Educators in Mental Health, Ontario Anti-Racist Educators. So there's so many great resources that you can access through social media that we definitely talk a lot about those ones within our family studies Facebook page, which is extremely active. But I think it's great because people are able to ask questions. And I think part of the topics that we came up with for these advisories that we're creating, a lot of it came from us sort of watching the Facebook page and seeing what people were asking about. And so we sort of used that as a data collection point for us. So, and it was just really, really helpful to be able to sort of see what people were asking for. Yes, Angela, you would need a Facebook account in order to access, I think, any of those pages or to become a member of them, because many of them are private member pages. So you actually have to become a member of the page. I do know some teachers who they don't like to use Facebook. They want to sort of keep their social media to a minimum. But what they've done is they've created a Facebook page, but only use it for these education sites. They don't use it personally because they want to be able to access some of these great resources and get really quick answers to questions, right? So you can post something for, if you're doing something in French, and I know a lot of the work in French is oral communication now, you could be posting something there and, people could, within 5 minutes, you could have 10 answers to your question that you might have. So it is definitely a great way to get additional supports.
If you're concerned about privacy issues, go ahead to like Gmail, for instance, and just create a second, like a fake Gmail account and register on Facebook using that account. So that it never, you never get anything coming to your personal account.
All right, should I move to our next slide?
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about planning. So as Teresa talked about, we identified these topics that we felt teachers needed support in. And so once we sort of identified that they needed that support or that help, we then started talking about planning. So we had our board meeting last summer, where we sort of had the conversation about creating these advisories. And then based on that, I put a proposal together. My role on the board is Director of Future Directions. It's a really kind of strange title. But I sort of put a proposal together to the board, and then we voted on it as a board to sort of say that, yes, we were interested in sort of pursuing this project. And so that sort of allowed us to get started in getting this project sort of going, and knowing that we had the support of the board of directors. Within that, I created a budget. And so we usually offer our writers and project lead a small honorarium, and then sort of created the timelines within that as well. And that was sort of voted on at the board, and then we went from there. Our next step then, as I mentioned, was sort of looking at funding. And in order to look at funding, we do have some funds within our OFSHEEA accounts. So this is money that we would have gained through our membership fees and conference fees in the past. And we used this funding for a variety of different projects. So we did access some money through the OFSHEEA honorarium, and then our OFSHEEA accounts, which was the honorarium for each of our writers. So that was for 5 people. And then we approached the Canadian Home Economics Foundation. It is an organization that's based out of, it is a Canadian organization, and they have a number of different grants. And we apply for usually 1 or 2 of these each year. And those grants help us to support our projects as well. All of these grants are usually quite small, but if we sort of put them all together, it can allow us to provide a small honorarium for people. It really is not much. It's just more of a thank you for the work that they're doing for us. Other potential sources of funding, OSSTF has a grant that they put out each year, subject association grant, which we always apply for as an association too for other projects. We didn't use it for this specific project, but we do use it for, we did use it like to update our website. We created resources for English language learners last year. And this year we're using it to create revise and update our documents around safety in the food and fashion programs. So definitely that money is there. So it's always great to consider how you can access additional funds, because our subject associations our funds aren't huge. We don't have a lot of money in them because, again, it's all membership based. So here, I think we're just sort of looking at having people think a little bit about what kinds of funds have different organizations use to cover the cost of special projects. We mentioned a few there. I'm wondering if there are other sources of funding. And Peter, you may be aware of some that we're not. I know the ministry used to provide funds, or sometimes provides funds for some of the subject areas, things like science and math. Sometimes we'll get funding through ministry funding. We haven't received any ministry funding for a while as a smaller association, though.
Ontario Teachers Federation. So they have although I don't think they had it this year, the TLLP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I knew a lot of teachers who used the TLP funding over a number of years and found it really helpful to be able to do some of their own professional learning using that funding. So that was a great way to access some funds as well.
Let me find the web page for their mail list. So it's a good idea to be on the mail list to learn about these kinds of initiatives.
Yeah, definitely. Because sometimes the grant requests will come up, you'll get something and you don't have a lot of days to get the request completed. One of the things that I've really learned over the years is I've become quite good at, I think anyways, at writing grant proposals and knowing what people want. So it was never something I ever thought I would be doing as a teacher. But as an educator for over 30 years, I've written a lot of grant requests, and something that I think they should maybe start teaching in Teachers College.
It's a good idea, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it does allow us to access some great funds, though, to help us support our programs. Okay, so the next part of it, after we had approval from the board of directors, then what we did is we did put out a email to our membership, and we posted it on the Family Studies Facebook page, looking for people who would be interested as applicants to become part of this project. So we have a job description that we use for any of our writing projects, and we just sort of revise and update it a little bit depending on the project that we're looking for. So we sent out the application via social media and Facebook and email, and applications in this project. For this project, applicants needed to be a member of OFSHEEA to be selected or to be considered. Some of the projects that we've done in the past, they did not need to be a member of OFSHEEA. It really just depends on where the money's coming from, as to if we consider having an OFSHEEA member or not. But we really, because these are curriculum-based projects, we really are looking for people with subject expertise, people who have lived experience, people who have other professional experience. So one of our writers, for example, was a dietitian before she became a family studies teacher. So she was working on the diet culture project, definitely had that experience as a professional. And then, as we said, we're always looking for people who have lived experience as part of the project. Became a little bit challenging in this project, especially for our First Nations, Inuit and Métis project, because we had limited people within our association who had who identified as being Indigenous. And so that became a little bit more challenging for us. Again, even when we went into the reviewing stage. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we progress through. So the writing process, it was a very kind of fluid, organic process. So I was the project lead for both of the two projects that we worked on this year. We met, the four of us met. So the two writers, we hired two writers for the Diet Culture project, two writers for the First Nations project. Teresa is one of the writers on the First Nations project. And so we, as a team of five, we initially met. We sort of had some conversation about where we sort of saw the project going, what we wanted it to look like. And then each team went off and worked independently to actually start the writing process. And they met, and that's one really great thing with Zoom now, is Zoom has really allowed us, or Zoom or my MS Teams, whatever, Google Meets, whatever you might use, it really has allowed us to expand who our writers are. It's reduced our costs because we don't have to physically be together in order to meet, which, years ago when we had writing projects, it was a lot more expensive because we had to physically, drive to places and find places to meet and, and have long distance phone calls and all of those kinds of things. So Zoom has been great and definitely well used throughout this process. So as the teams met, we went through several different drafts. Many changes happened. We had reviewers who were part of the project, and those reviewers, we consulted with them quite a bit, and they were really, really helpful in working us through the actual project. So when we talk about having reviewers, though, because we can't, while we have some expertise in this area, we do have a strong understanding of our curriculum. We're not always we can't always be the most up to date, for example, on topics. So it can be challenging to find the reviewers who have have the skills and the knowledge that we needed. We did look for community partners who had some understanding of curriculum. So, for example, in the Diet Culture Project, we worked with 3 reviewers. One is called NEDIC, which is the National Eating Disorders Information Center, and they are amazing and have such great resources, and are very much up to date on the latest information, the latest research in this area. We also worked with school Nutrition Connections, I think it is. I'm just at loss right now for the name. I think that's it. And again, we worked with them as well, and they are very much in the loop when it comes to this kind of work. And then Dietitians for Teachers as well. So those were the 3 organizations we worked with on the Diet Culture Project. When it came to locating reviewers to help us with the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit project, it was a little bit more challenging to find reviewers, and it took me a little bit of time. I made a lot of contacts with people, but what we're finding, I think right now, because of all the work that's being done in this area, is that many of the groups and associations, the school leads at school boards, the subject associations that are connected with this, they're so busy because they're being asked by so many groups in the ministry to be involved in projects that it was challenging to find somebody. Eventually, we did connect with a group out of North Bay who is part of one of the federal schools. And so we worked with them, the KEB, it's KEB, and they were so awesome to work with. And we were excited to really be able to connect with them. And what's really come of establishing these partnerships now is that potential to develop long-term relationships, which allows us to work with these organizations and associations going forward, in a long-term kind of basis. So we were really excited to be able to work with all of these groups, and they all had a really good understanding of education, curriculum, and as well as the current issues, and supported us in making sure that what we were putting out to our members and to other family studies teachers was representative of the current issues that we were addressing in our advisories. And then just here is talking about reviewing the resources. So we have on our website, on OFSHEEA's website, we have many resources that are available, both for members and non-members. Many of these are teaching resources that would be used in a classroom. And so teachers would be able to access them. Many times their assignments, culminating activities, those kinds of things. And what we've done over the last six months or so is we've actually, some of our board members got together and we've gone through and we reviewed those resources to make sure that those resources reflect the work that we're doing in the advisories. So for example, especially when it came to the diet culture resources, we had resources on the website that were very much in supporting or encouraging diet culture. Things like, where we would have students track the food that they ate and look at calories in versus calories out. There were some assignments that talked about eating disorders. So these were all assignments that were up on our website as resources that teachers could access, but we needed to be able to go through those and make sure whatever's on our website is going to be truth or honest to and reflect the work that we're doing in the advisories. And so we'll continue to add more of those resources going forward.
Okay, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we eventually came up with. So we went through these writing processes, these reviewing processes, and we're sharing this information because in the hopes that other subject councils, subject associations, et cetera, might want to use this as a template for how they can run these projects for their own subject areas. So what I wanted to share with you briefly is what we came up with as some finished projects. So this document here, can you see my document, the PDF on the screen? Just checking. Okay. So our first curriculum advisory, this is our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit perspectives and family studies. So this is our title page, table of contents. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I wanted to show you that what this one looks like is, identifying overall and specific education expectations within family studies course curricula and making recommendations about how we can specifically meet these curriculum expectations while including First Nations, Métis, and or Inuit content in our courses. So you can see that we went through a number of different courses in the curriculum and made specific suggestions about how to include these perspectives in those courses. So we're hoping that teachers can use this document to say, hey, I am going to teach about family, Canada's food guide. How can I bring in some FNMI perspectives? And this document provides that. The second document the second way that we presented information for our diet culture document, it looks very different. So you can see that these two projects had different results, but they both kind of serve the same purpose of providing resources, curriculum connections, et cetera, to our teachers. Oh, I should mention that we do have links to resources as well in this FNMI document. So for diet culture, again, the group that did this writing project created this slideshow to really encourage teachers to work through some of the biases that we might have, some of the challenging areas of talking about diet culture, of unpacking it, and then created this beautiful slideshow research as a way to support teachers in kind of, again, unlearning and relearning how we address some of these topics in our subject area. So we came up with these two documents as our first two projects. So we have begun the process of sharing these documents directly with our members and the people for now who are participating in our workshops, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. And as we complete these documents and complete our workshops, we are also going to make sure that we are sharing these documents directly with boards so that they can share the documents with teachers in their subject area. And we'll kind of spread these documents to really whoever can use them. Our hope is really, obviously we've done this because we want to support our members, but we are also interested in supporting all family studies teachers who are interested in doing this work, right? We're trying to have a really nice broad audience for these things that we have developed. So I mentioned workshops. So OFSHEEA, for a little over a year now, has been hosting monthly workshops where we have different presenters, different discussions on different topics that relate to family studies teachers. So we are using those as one of the avenues through which we're sharing these curriculum advisory projects with both members and non-members. So we're having 2 or 3 workshops per topic led by the project writers, where we're letting the writers kind of share the documents, discuss the context of the documents, and then also, providing discussion activities, jam boards, breakout room discussions, all of those things to help teachers kind of unpack this new information in the documents. And part of that process as well is having workshops where we are having discussions about actually applying those documents in the classroom. So, here's the curriculum connection, how can we turn that into a lesson? How can we actually use it in the classroom? And then through these workshops, through these conversations, lesson planning, discussion, what we're trying to do is change the culture in our education system of how we address these topics, whose perspectives we're including, et cetera. So that's kind of what we're doing with the monthly workshops. And so far, we've had a lot of interest in the monthly workshops. We've had a lot of engagement from both members and just family studies teachers across the province in kind of learning more about the two topics that we started with, so the diet culture and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit perspectives. People are really enthusiastic about learning more in terms of how to incorporate those topics into their classes and their courses that they teach.
Okay. So, and I think as Teresa was talking about with the monthly workshops, the attendance at these workshops has been amazing. We opened up registration today, for example, for the second workshop with the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit resource. And, we've already hit, I think, over 50 people registered, and it's only been open for a couple of hours. So people are definitely really excited, interested, and I think are feeling very supported to be able to have this kind of information available to them. And I think that's a role that many of our subject associations play for teachers, because we are able to provide that very specific subject specific information for teachers and supports for teachers, which in some cases in our smaller subject areas, at a board level, and ministry level, we may not be getting that support. So as an association, we're really working hard to ensure that teachers have that information available to them, and to help them have that safe place to actually have the conversations. Because some of the conversations, especially when it comes to things like the diet culture conversation, is a really difficult conversation for many of us, because not only are we addressing that in our classrooms, but we're also addressing it in our own lives as a person, right? As a person too, we're also looking at our beliefs and that unlearning piece around Indigenous ways, and how do we incorporate that in a way that we're not appropriating, and that we're respecting culture, and really incorporating these kinds of ideas, not just as a one-off in your classroom as well. And so that's where we really kind of try to reinforce that. And that's might be where you are today, that I'm going to teach that lesson today that's about a particular topic. But as we talk about going forward, how do we really weave it throughout our curriculums and our courses, so that all students feel respected and feel valued in the classroom. So,
could you share the link where we can find out about these workshops?
Yeah, I can put the Zoom link in there for this. Will be the link for the the First Nations one, which is on Wednesday, May 25th. So that's our next workshop. Mm-hmm. The diet culture one, we actually had a workshop yesterday, and the next workshop is not until May 30th, and we haven't opened registration for that one yet.
Do you have a link to just the generic workshops page?
So I don't have anything we don't have anything specific on our website.
Okay.
So this is the Zoom link here for the First Nations one. I'll put that in there anyways. But I don't have, as I said, I don't have the link yet for the other one.
Okay. All right.
But definitely, and anybody's more than welcome to join us at these workshops. You don't need to be a family studies teacher. For example, the diet culture ones, we would really I would think any teacher, because it's not super specific to family studies all the time. Any teacher, whether you were even teaching elementary school or high school, it's something that we all need to do. No matter, it's personal stuff as well, right? Mm-hmm. So going forward, we, as Teresa mentioned, we have two more advisories that we're going to be working on over the summer and into the fall. Our biggest thing right now is really looking for reviewers earlier on, because that sort of slowed our process down this year. So I'm starting to look for reviewers for our next two documents now. And now that we actually sort of have an idea of what it will look like, I think the process will be a little bit quicker. We won't quite take as long to get the next two documents done. Our goal is to have them done in the fall and have them released in the fall, so we can have sort of those realistic deadlines, but really sort of think now that we sort of have a framework and idea, it's going to be a little bit easier, I think, to put the next two documents together. But also, we can't rush this work because we really do need to spend the time thinking about the work that we're doing, the value of this work, and making sure that we're hearing all the voices that need to be heard as we're sort of working through this project. So that's sort of our next steps. Anyways, we're really excited to be able to go forward with these next two documents as well.
So I think that's it from us. Obviously, we're happy to answer any questions about this project, this process, how, if people have questions about how it might apply to their subject association or their subject area too, I think we can maybe help with that. Really what we want to try and address is, that feeling when you're in a PD and you're like, this all sounds great, but like, how do I apply it to my subject area? Those are the connections that we're trying to make. So we're really trying to show, family studies teachers, this is how we do it in family studies. Because, we've noticed from our members that was sometimes the piece that was missing when these new really important topics come up in education is really, how do we integrate them into our subjects?
Mm-hmm. I think there's that value in knowing. So while we've created these specific documents for family studies, this process, I think, would be valuable for other subject associations too, right? Because again, the curriculum outdates itself so quickly and much faster now than ever. I think, and sometimes too, we just don't want to get stuck in those specific expectations in the curriculum that maybe aren't truly being addressed the way that they should be in our classrooms, because we know different now than we knew 10 years ago. Okay, yeah, and here's our contact information. So if anybody wants to email us with any specific questions, if you're as an association, you're thinking you might want to do something like this, we are more than willing to, sort of meet with you, have a Zoom chat, talk a little bit about how we did it, and sort of support you through that process to help support teachers in your subject area.
That's wonderful. And I'll make sure that contact information is in the show notes. Let me share my screen again. Thank you so much, Teresa and Michelin. That was interesting. It's a shame that we didn't have more people here to learn about this process. Yeah. So we're going to be sending out an email probably tomorrow, and it'll have a link to the evaluation form. Although, let me pop the evaluation form in there right now. Okay, there we go. So there's the evaluation form. So like I was saying, an email will go out tomorrow with a link to the evaluation form if you don't have a chance to fill it in now. A link to the slide deck will be included, as well as a link to the video. And I've already shared that. Before we go, I want to profile two OTF resources. So one is the PD calendar. I'm finding many teachers aren't aware of the PD calendar. So that's basically, your go-to place if you want to take an AQ or an ABQ. So instead of, going to all the different faculties of education or the different unions that are offering courses, this is kind of a one shop. So one stop. You can just come here, search for the discipline that you're interested in, and the start date, etc., and you'll be able to find it here, and then have links to where the courses are offered. And if you don't have the link, although I'm gonna share the link in the show notes, which you'll receive, but you can also just search for OTF PD calendar and you'll find it, as well as the OTF YouTube channel. So that's where all these videos are being shared. So I would encourage you to go there and perhaps subscribe so you can find out what new videos are being released there.